Like when I'm with Tamika and the movement and marching, of course it's resistance, especially with, things with the, with LBGT and just different things that with the hip hop community and me coming from prison, it's just different pressures and peer pressures that we face, especially being a man. So, Mika stresses to me, if it don't apply, let it fly, never speak on it. But my thing is, I'm strong enough now to be able to say, hey, everybody can be who they are. But it was a time, like when I first went to prison, when I wasn't that strong. Like I was fearful of homosexuals just because how I may be perceived. But just through, I guess, maturity and different experiences and being around good people of all backgrounds sexually, it brought me to a space where I was strong enough to where I'm good around whoever. So I think bringing it back to the music, I don't think a lot of people are really strong enough to step out on their own and whatnot. And it goes back to education, because coming from prison, I never knew so many were illiterate. I didn't know. You hear about illiteracy so much in the United States, but you don't see it because everyone I knew could read.
Most prisons, 85 to 90% of those in prison
in
are
prisons, the illiteracy rate is so high, and if they don't know nothing, when they come out, 95% of the people in prison is coming home. They're coming home to our communities, and they're going to revert back to what they know, and what we know is grabbing a gun or grabbing the drugs. So if we want to change, we have to, I think it's imperative that we push education in the prison systems. When I was in Sing Sing, I completed my associate's degree through Mercy College. Thank you. But when I was there, everyone who graduated and went home, there was a 0% recidivism rate. Mm. So, I mean, that would lead me to say we need colleges Precisely. And more prisons, but they're being eliminated. You know what I mean? So it makes no sense. But I think that's the key. We got to educate the brothers, because we coming home to this misconception that our friend that's getting all the money is going to bless us, or, that it's just going to be like we picture in our dreams, and it's not like that. Like when we get home, it's the harsh reality that everybody's rapping and you might not get put on. No one's coming to give you some money. So what you going to do? And most of us, without that education, we can't go on a job that's going to pay us anything that can get us anything we want, and really just to maintain a realistic life when you don't have no real education. So I think we just got to push that, and pardon me for getting a little off, but we here.
Linda, John, and Dave, I want you to all answer this question in that order. How have you dealt with, Jay talked about education, how have you dealt with trying to educate not just artists, but also folks who want to be involved in activism to understand how they have to navigate these things? And not everybody is fully aware. There are people who, I see some artists who say some of the most ridiculous things, that people, they blast them on social media, but I use the phrase, when you don't know, you don't know. And so how have you, I'll start with you, Linda, what have those conversations been like, trying to be patient to, in essence, coach somebody up to get them to understand what the issues are, why their voice is important, why their dollars are necessary, when they really had no idea what the hell was going on?
Thank you, Roland, and I'm honored and humbled to be here. I've been here, I think, 5 years in a row, and it's my favorite panel at CBC, not just because we're on it, but I want to be really clear when I answer these questions, and the people that I'm committed in investing in educating are our people of color, black people, people that it's not that they are ignorant, it's that they're just missing some knowledge. It's about not having a relationship with someone. And for me, that's the investment that I make every single day. And what it requires is for us to meet people where they're at. I don't like people bossing me around and telling me, here's the 3 things you need to believe about this issue. That's not how it works. And that's kind of the culture that we live in right now. Somebody wants to determine how you should perceive an issue without even having a conversation about you, about how you interact with that issue or how that issue actually impacts you in your life. And that's what organizing is. That's how you know when someone's not an organizer. An activist is not the same as an organizer. I also want to make that clear. And so we are not activists, we are organizers, because it's about 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. That's mass mobilization, that's mass organizing. An activist is an individual, and activists are important. We're not saying they're not important. But an activist is one person who cares about something and does some stuff around that thing that they care about. An organizer is someone that believes that their power comes from organizing and building power with other people in the communities that we come from. And what I say to people about organizing, giving money, we have been taught as people of color, as immigrants, as black people, that you don't have money. You don't have power. You're all poor. But that's actually not the case, because who gets to define what wealth actually means? I don't define my wealth by the money that I have in my pocket. I define wealth by integrity, by communities, by the amounts of churches and people who go to the church and go to the mosque, and people who are good to their communities, that are doing good in their community. So we can't let people define what wealth actually is for us. Like today I was at the hotel and I saw people at Starbucks. A lot of people from CBC was at Starbucks. Average amount of money you pay in at Starbucks is $5. And a lot of people go there every day. You go to different coffee shops, you're spending $5 on a latte. I always tell people, what if you decided that one day a week you were not going to buy that latte? That's $5 you just put back in your pocket, and then you have $20 at the end of the month that you could give to a local organizer, an anti-gun violence group, a local food pantry in your community. Give it back to the church that's doing social justice where we got money. What we have to realize is that $20 plus $20 plus $20 plus $20, that's what makes money. I'm not looking for the big donations. In fact, we try to run away from the big donation, because there is no big donation that don't come with strings attached.
Well, first of all, if you look at Bernie's Linda, you look at Bernie's campaign, he raised the most money in 2016, and the average donation was $28.
20 bucks. The old man's running out here raising $5, $20, and that's actually how the Women's March first started. It started out by people across the country being like, I'm going to give these people, I'm fed up, I don't know why we got this president, I'm going to give these people $20 and $20 and $5 and $20, until we were able to organize the largest single-day demonstration in American history. And it's not just that it was the largest single-day demonstration in American history. This is something very important and core to the way we organize. I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't like people telling me what to say. I say what I want to say, I say what I feel, and I say what I believe. And if you want integral voices in our communities, and I always tell people this, people critique the movement all the time. The armchair folks, you know, the ones with the social media but don't got no power and influence in their communities, they're always like, why y'all don't do that? Why didn't this happen? You could have done that. And I say to people, a lot of people will say end capitalism. Guess what? Capitalism ain't ending anytime soon. So we have to work within the system that was given to us. So I always say to people, why, instead of critiquing the movement, why don't you help us build a movement that is worthy of our people? We don't have a movement that is worthy of our people. That's just the bottom line here. And also on the media level. If I go on the media and I say something that somebody don't like, you don't see me for like 2 months, because they're trying to get people to forget what I said till they bring me back again. That's what always happens to
Mainstream media.
Mainstream media. Mainstream media. That's why we create our own media. That's why we go on Roland. When I want to say what I want to say, I go to Roland Martin's show, I go to Mark Thompson, I go to Democracy Now!, and I say whatever I need to say. But
that's why the show is called Roland Martin Unfiltered.
It's perfect. But I will end by saying that we have to change our perspective and our mindset about what we have been taught for so long and unlearn everything that we have been taught. Because we got power. And even when we think about the last election, because I'm all in election mode right now, like we got a serious situation here. Like we are in a serious situation. This is not lesser of two evils and all the other nonsense analysts want to say. This is about fascism or no fascism. That's really what it is right now. And so what I tell people all the time, in the primaries, go for who you like. Whoever moves you, whoever you like. That's the point of a primary. But that person isn't going to win if you ain't giving them $5, if you ain't out here knocking doors, if you ain't calling nobody, they're just not going to win. And what I will say also is we got to follow the people within our movements that are doing the right thing. The bottom line is the black women always do the right thing. They always do the right thing. And that's it. And that's just the bottom line. So for me, I also listen. I may have my own opinion. I'm not going to take everybody and embody someone else's positions because I'm a different person. I grew up differently. I come from a different place. My issues also include foreign policy, so I might, care about some other stuff. But I also watch, why is it that black women vote at 95%? Why is that? And that means we all got to follow that track. So what we got to focus on in the next 15 months is funding the organizers who are building and getting out the vote. Not 3 weeks before the election, but starting right now, going into places where nobody's going. We got to fund the candidates that are speaking to your issues and keeping them on those stages so they can keep talking about our issues. And we also got to listen carefully, because just because someone ain't using the lexicon that you know doesn't mean they're not speaking to your issue. So we just got to figure out how to save our people real quick, because if this administration is in there for 4 more years, I don't know how fast we're going to come back from that in this generation.
I'm going to unpack that in a moment, but we're going to go to Reverend Yearwood and Dave. Before I do so, I want to shout out Congresswoman Yvette Clarke out of New York.
Brooklyn!
Would you say from the nation of Brooklyn? Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah, all right. What, you got your own flag and everything now? All right. Look at Congresswoman. Yeah, Let me shout out my man, Dr. Steve Perry, one of the top educators in the country. And I'm so glad my next man went back to his other damn name. I couldn't pronounce what the hell he was calling himself. Co-founder of the Dream Defenders, my frat brother, Philip Agnew.
Yay, Phil!
I couldn't call. I was like, Yeah, well, I don't know what. Like, Philip, answer the phone. All right, Reverend Yearwood.
Well, let me just say, this is such an honor to be here on so many different levels. Let me first say thank you to my dear brother, Congressman Andre Carson. He is such an amazing figure in this movement. We sometimes forget that he is from the great state of Indiana. And as well as a Muslim. And I think that just shows that when I hear so many times about what the heartland is thinking, I then look at Congressman Carson and say, this is an amazing Muslim brother from Indiana holding it down for our people with tremendous values. And so I just want to say thank you to him. I just want to start off with just a little bit of history, because I think that, when this panel came into being, first, when the Hip Hop Caucus came into being 15 years ago, when we first, and Jeff was a part of it, all of us most on this panel were a part of that process, but when we first came to the Congressional Black Caucus to hold an event called Hip Hop, there was, like Jesus, no room in the inn. And so we literally had to go to Howard University to hold the first hip hop caucus, the first panel like this on hip hop in politics called The Blueprint, which is what Johnson had made, was the name what we called it. That was the first event held on September 11th, 2004. There was no room. We could not have a panel at the CBC called hip hop. It could be called Amazing Youth. It could be called, Youth Rising. It could be called anything with young people emerging, but it could not be called hip hop. And so we had that down the street at Howard. 900 people showed up at that event. Since then when Councilman Carson was elected, and because he was an artist, he was a hip hop artist, we went to him and he says, no, we are going to have a brain trust called hip hop. It's going to be called Hip Hop in Politics. And so 10 years ago, from this time frame, we created this, and it started off with maybe about a quarter, which is in here now, and has now grown to we have folks outside in the hallways, around the room, can't find seats, called hip hop. It seems strange now, but it's now a part of the fabric. Now we have artists, and we actually at that time had Jay-Z and Russell and other folks who were engaged. They could not come. They could come be a part of another panel, but not be a part of this panel. And so this is history right here. I just want to make sure that 10 years down the road, it seems like nothing, but you are a part of history in this room, but something that the Congressional Black Caucus, God bless, and I love the CBC, but it would not allow us, because sometimes we are afraid of our own people. And I think that's the core of why this conversation is so important, because we can have a conversation and sometimes be bougie and be in these rooms, and sometimes forget that it's not just about the suites, but also about the streets. And so I think that where we are now as an organization called the Hip Hop Caucus, and because of this conversation, me listening to you saying that, Rev, our movement is too patriarchal. It's too many men who are running, too sexist. They make too many comments. We have to change that dynamic. So I'm proud that not only the Hip Hop Caucus now has the board chair is a woman, but our ED is a woman, and the one who now runs this organization as an operations manager in her 20s, Jasmine, can you stand up, is a woman in our LA office.
Hey, Jasmine.
And in that process, as an organization called the Hip Hop Caucus, we just partnered. We had our Respect My Vote voting campaign, which we will do again, which will turns 11 years this year, in which we've had artists from T.I. And Keisha Cole and Sierra and 2 Chainz and Charlamagne the God and Amber Rose. And you'll notice that I'm mentioning both male and female, because our board mandated us that we can never have another campaign that is run by only a male artist. Any campaign must have equal to it. If there's a male as the head of the campaign, there must be a woman as the head of the campaign as well. And we must figure out ways to ensure that women artists, not just because of glam and it's harder for them to get out, but we must figure out how women artists have key roles in this movement, because there is no movement without women. And so in that Respect My Vote campaign, one of the key things there is that we have now partnered with another amazing organization, with the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated has only created 3 MOUs in its illustrious history. One with the Urban League, one with the NAACP, and this past at their convention, they created their only 3rd MOU to do an activity with the Hip Hop Caucus. That is history. That is powerful. And I'm so happy for President Ward and the men of Alpha Alpha to...
All the alphas in the room. Where you at? All right.
Give it up for the alphas, y'all.
Continue.
Yeah, give it up for the alphas, y'all. Give it up for them.
Don't worry about it. We good. We good. We good.
And so in that process, one of the things there that was history being made for this voting campaign, Respect My Vote. Let me just close with this, because Hip Hop Caucus runs not only on the national, now we are in 32 cities. I just came back from Cape Town, Africa yesterday, and internationally. I want to say this in that fighting issues from healthcare, education, climate change, definitely have prayers for those in the Bahamas and throughout the Caribbean. Puerto Rico will celebrate the anniversary of Maria next week. But let me just say this, but also on the local level. And so I want to say that one of the powerful things there is that we now have cities, and so we're here in D.C., and sometimes when we come to these conversations, many of you don't know that here in D.C. there are also problems that go on. And so we missed that. One, the population of D.C. statehood. D.C. needs to be a state. We need to support Eleanor Holmes Norton in that cause and make sure we support her for wherever we are. But even more so, with the brothers who are part of Hip Hop Caucus D.C. to stand up real quick. Ronnie and Tone, put your hand up over there in that aspect. And so Ronnie also runs the Green Scheme. And one of the powerful things they did was called something called Don't Mute D.C., dealing with the gentrification here in the city. And so I just want to just make sure that you connect, if you're here locally, connect with these brothers who are here doing it. Now they have a new campaign called Don't Mute Our Health, because they realize that the sugary drinks, and so many people are getting diabetes and cancer and other aspects because these companies are polluting our communities, and they're actually now challenging, shutting down grocery stores, marching. And so Ronnie, put your hand up. He got some t-shirts for you. So with Don't Mute Our Health, Hip Hop Caucus DC, and the Green Scheme, make sure you connect with them. But that's how institutions have to work. I know Jeff is happy. I know Tamika's happy. I know Roland is happy, because the thing that I just showed you right now is that it isn't about Rev at all. It's about growing and making an institution that can support us. And so I just had young people stand up like Jasmine and Ronnie and Tone and other young folks in their 20s and their 30s leading this institution. And that's what needs to happen, because the only way that we can go forward, this generation realizes that the ones before us in the 20th century, they fought for equality. But this generation in the 21st century is fighting for existence.
Also, there are people obviously who could not be here, and this is why Congressman Carson is always smart, because he knows he invites me to moderate. He guaranteed to get media coverage. So we're actually live. So we're live right now. So we're streaming now on Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube. So if you just go to my YouTube channel, you can click to share the link and send it out to everybody. And that way, if folks who are not here, they can actually watch the rest of this panel. And so go ahead and do that. And again, that's what happens when you own your own shit. All right, Dave, talk about the conversations that you've had with people and those who did not see that they had a role in terms of being involved in issues, being involved in movements. What have those been like? And whether it was when you were running the source, whether it's in present day, share what that has been like trying to get folks to get to that point.
Sure. How you doing, everybody? Happy to be here today. First, want to thank Congressman Carson for having me to be a part of this, and also for creating this forum here for hip hop as officially a part of the Congressional Black Caucus. I think that's an amazing thing, and I'm really happy that he has created this, and it's gone on for so many years, and for me to be able to join it. Also, I'm the creator and founder of the Source magazine and also the Source Awards. Started it myself in 1988. And it was very, interesting time in hip hop when I got into it, and was involved, and have been involved in it still to this day. I want to take just one moment also in the spirit of history that Rev Yearwood just brought up, to acknowledge that today is 23 years since the passing of Tupac Shakur, who is the most important and most influential hip hop artist ever to live. And, just want to maybe take a moment of brief silence to recognize Tupac Shakur. Thank you all. And I think Tupac is interesting, to one of the things I wanted to kind of raise, because I haven't heard a lot about hip hop so far on the panel, and I know that's what this panel is about. And I think hip hop really is kind of the answer in some ways to a lot of the issues and the things that have been talked about and raised so far. When I got involved in hip hop, it was at a time that's called the Golden Age in the mid '80s, and it was a very powerful time where the music that was coming from the streets and from the inner city communities across America started, of course, in New York City, but spread everywhere across the country. Was becoming very successful, very widely embraced by young people pretty much under 30 years of age. At the time I started the Source, I was 19, and the staff that worked for the Source for me for many years, we took pride of everybody was under 25 years old. But it was also a time when hip hop was breaking all barriers out there in terms of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic class. People of all backgrounds were coming together for a love of hip hop and what the movement was about. And that was, what excited me, being a kid actually born and raised here in Washington, D.C., grew up on go-go music more than hip hop actually. But when I got to college, I went to Harvard, which is where I started The Source out of my dorm room while I was hosting a radio show on the station there. And so, hip hop really was a very powerful movement that was breaking so many barriers and unifying a group of people of all backgrounds. And the concept of power to the people is really what the hip hop movement was about. And I believe hip hop was on a path in those days to really have a much greater impact on the world socially and politically. And unfortunately, in my view, starting with the kind of the death of Tupac is when hip hop began to take a turn, and corporations began to slowly but surely assert more power and influence over the music and the culture and the direction of it. And that kind of resulted in a place where 20 or 30 years later, hip hop really, although there are many great artists out there with social and politically conscious voices, it's not anything like what it was in those days, and we've lost a great deal of that, and that's a much longer conversation as to why that happened. But I guess I want to try to conclude with a couple of things. I think now, number one, to your question, Roland, about reaching people. I mean, what made The Source successful in what I did was its ability to reach the people, and recognizing I was building a business and I was dealing with corporations. I was really the first person to bring hip hop into corporate America, to go out and take a trip to Portland and see the people at Nike in 1991. This lily white community and company that didn't have any connection at all to what was going on with hip hop, and try to convince them and educate them what it was about and why it was something that was going to be integral to their future. But it was about understanding that hip hop comes from the streets and comes from these communities. It comes really as an expression of the pain and the struggle of people that have grown up in these oppressed communities across our country for so many years. And understanding that you can't turn your back on those people. That was an issue that a lot of people, once hip hop became more corporate, there was a sort of desire to kind of cut the streets out of it and keep that sort of element out of it. And I was really the person in the middle of it all, kind of holding that ground and keeping the streets and the corporate side of hip hop, kind of on an equal basis. And at the end of the day, people were listening, and we were creating a movement, and people that you would think today are people that may not express an interest in some of these social and political issues. If we were able to begin to use hip hop again as not only a media platform, but in other ways to reach young people, I think we'll find that that'll be a powerful way to get them interested and engaged. I just came back from Milwaukee 2 weeks ago. I partnered with the city of Milwaukee, and they are the first city in America to create an official hip hop week backed by the city. Very historical thing that just took place, and we had an incredible week of activities and lots of hip hop artists and activists and other people involved out there. And one of the main kind of the crux and goal of the week is to show that hip hop can be a empowering force for the community and can be used as a way to get people interested, attract them. And so we had different people from the hip hop community speaking to the public on events, not on events, but on issues that are of importance. So the three things that the city of Milwaukee focused on this year were civic engagement, health and wellness, and financial literacy. We addressed all of those in different forums. We had DJ Envy from the Breakfast Club speak to the public about real estate and financial investment and how do you qualify for bank loans and different things about that. Milwaukee's a city that has the third lowest rate of black home ownership in the country, only 7% black home ownership. We put together an event called Hip Hop Goes to the Polls, where I brought Scarface, who's now the first major hip hop artist in history to run for public office. He's currently running for city council in Houston. Yes,
Yep.
shout out to Brad Jordan, Mr. Scarface, who's in D.C.
Because all of his posters say Brad Jordan,
Exactly.
not Scarface.
So we brought Face
Yes, in a suit.
in a suit last night. I was impressed. So we had Scarface and the lieutenant governor of the state of Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, who's the first black man to ever hold that position in that state. He's a huge hip hop fan, and we came together and we held an event called Hip Hop Goes to the Polls to get people more interested in hip hop and politics. So these are among some of the things I'm doing now. These days I've created Dave Mays Media, which is brand new. I'm based currently back here in Washington, D.C. And I think, again, it just kind of comes back to hip-hop in so many different ways. And if we can begin to embrace hip-hop and look at it from all angles, again, you can't just look at the artists. You have to also look at these corporations that are really, controlling things. This was, Rose spoke to this earlier, and that's the way it's been throughout history with music and with all forms of black music that enter into the commercial music business and end up in the hands of a few multinational corporations that control and monopolize the music industry, the radio airwaves, all things of that nature. So a lot of times we don't get to focus on that. We get to focus more just on the messaging from the artist, but we don't understand how much of that really is being dictated and controlled by these corporations. So I'll wrap up on that note and really appreciate it.
Hey, real quick. In 2004, a lot of the people on stage were involved in either the Hip Hop Summit Action Network or Vote or Die in some way, shape, or form, and they were artist-driven movements that lacked political substance in a lot of ways. And I think the challenge, we act like artists aren't people. And in their fame, the larger they grow, the more we remove their humanity. And so as you talk about how do we talk to artists, whether it's the folks that Dave has known for the last 30 years or others on this stage, we create relationship. Yeah. And so this isn't about me trying to engage an artist as an activist or an organizer who's trying to tell you what you should be doing. This is, how do I have a conversation with my brother? Or how do I have a conversation with my sister? How do I make myself available when they need to talk? So that as they're going through their own personal evolution, no different than the youngins that's on the block. Right. Because every single one of these artists that's platinum was a youngin on the block. Right. And one of the things they resent is that, nigga, you didn't want to talk to me when I wasn't platinum. And so you want to engage me now. But even when I was coming up, you didn't have no love for me. And so if our organizations, our elected officials, our business owners aren't developing relationships with youngins as they're coming up, right? Why should they want to be engaged with what you're doing when they get popular? And so I would just suggest there are 5 young people that you cross paths with in your daily week that you don't talk to. I'm not saying telling them how to dress, telling them how to talk, telling them what to do. I mean, talk to them. Ask them what they care about, what their dreams and aspirations are, what frustrates them and makes them angry. Because from an organizing standpoint, it's the things that I'm naturally frustrated and angered by that will be the issues that I'll plug into as I begin to get resources and opportunity. And so I just think that what I've seen over the last 20 years is I've talked to young brothers and sisters who have been engaged because at the time that I talked to them, they were in that place in their personal evolution where it was time. And sometimes it was just having a conversation with Tamika or with Linda or with somebody else about somebody they have a better relationship with who I knew 5 years ago when they were going through something different, to compare notes, to be supportive in their personal evolution instead of judgmental about what I think their personal evolution should be.
And also, again, and availing yourself. I mean, look, there are a number of artists who I've met who said, look, man, if something come up, can I just call you and bounce it off of you? Because this is what you do. I'm like, yeah. I was like, here's my number. And I have artists who say, look, man, this thing is going on. We might address it on stage. What should we be saying? Because the other piece is, for a lot of them, they also, and not just for the artists, but also for everyday ordinary people, they don't know who to trust and the information is coming from. And so that's also a key there. What I want to talk about now, this is still along the same vein, and it's not directed at anybody. Y'all can jump in so we can have the crosstalk back and forth. Linda talked about in terms of how critically important this election is. We talked about mobilizing dollars and having those collective dollars, but now let's deal with also how they relate to politics. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I keep seeing in how people connect with folks in politics is that we don't connect the dots. There are folks out, for many of us, this is what we live and breathe every day. Is folks ain't got no clue why Trump getting 150 federal judges for life is going to have an impact on their life. And I mean, I remember we were doing a show on this, and I said, look, if he appoints a 35-year-old woman who's been out of law school for 11 years, in 24 years, we're going to be a nation majority of people of color. If she serves until she's 85, she will serve another 26 years beyond when we are a nation majority of people of color. Folks are like, really? Not understanding lifetime means lifetime. They could die in that job. And so we saw in 2016, people were not connecting the dots. And folks were just saying, this is my one issue. I ain't down with that. I'm not going to vote for you. And so for all of you, how do we, again, get people, especially 18 to 34, to understand you cannot, under any circumstances, sit not just the presidential election out, but sit out the Senate race, congressional races, mayoral races, state Supreme Court races, DA races. How do you see getting them to understand that and connecting those dots just in your own way? Anybody can jump in.
I was going to say,
I was going to say, pardon me, Mika, that I feel it's imperative that we talk to them and we got to break it down into little pieces so they can understand. Like, I don't care about the presidential election, but it's the little ones, who's going to be the district attorney in my borough or wherever town I'm in,
right.
because people don't understand, like, the reality is, it's our kids that's out here committing the crimes. So it's our kids that's going to be in front of these judges. So it matters. And it's like, if your kid is a little criminal, you got to explain to him. The DA is who's trying to put your lights out.
But hold up.
He's trying to put your lights out.
But you just said, I don't care about the presidential race, but if somebody commits a federal crime, they're going to go before a U.S. attorney and a federal judge, who are both appointed by the president.
Pardon me. I do care. What I'm saying is, some of us feel like our vote can't affect that level.
Right.
So when I say I don't care, I'm not stressing I want our people to know your vote counts more in your
absolutely.
area.
Absolutely. But I'm only
more.
connecting the dots.
Right.
And again, that the president appoints that judge.
Absolutely.
The president appoints that U.S. attorney.
Who you gonna be facing when you're doing all the crimes, and
right.
you gotta care who the DA is. You
Right.
have to care who the DA is, if nothing else.
I mean, I was just going to say that I don't know exactly all the ways that we do get young people to pay attention, but I know we will not get them to pay attention by telling them that somebody died for them to be able to vote. That is like, we need to be delivered from that storyline, because it's not working anymore. You know, we're beyond that. I know young people are more aware and educated about what is happening now because of social media than they've ever been. And what I see is a lot of young people who are really asking very specific questions. What is so-and-so going to do about this issue or that issue, and how will they impact my community? And like last night, it was a big deal for some young people that I saw on social media after the debates, trying to understand what in the hell is a record player. They didn't get it. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. It's real. They didn't understand what one of the presidential candidates was talking about when they said a record player, and that connection to our
Right.
young people is so important because they are literally listening to everything, and they want to know, do you even know what they're interested in this day? Because if you're still using the language around record players, it makes me as a young person wonder whether or not you even know what's happening in our generation. So
That's
how
right.
can you lead me?
That's right.
You know.
And I think what's also happening, and Linda, you can jump in. What's also happens that people, and our former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., he and I were having this conversation. There were a group of young people who came to him, and they said, Congressman, if you don't do this, we're going to throw your ass out of office. And he said, that's cute, but I don't give a damn what none of y'all think. He said, you know why? He pointed, he said, you see that tower right there? He said, that high rise is an assisted living facility. He said, and all them old people, they vote. He said, now I'm going to tell you something right now. Y'all don't. He said, now, I'm going to go over there all the time because they get out to vote. I saw a poll the other day. They were talking about Latinos would be the largest block of minority voters based upon, they said, eligible voters. I said, and I tweeted this, I said, no, you might have numbers, but if you don't register and don't vote, your numbers mean nothing. And that's also why I think, so when people say, why are these candidates only talking to these older voters? I'm like, because you know what? If you look at the numbers, they are coming out massive numbers. Andrew Gillum lost in Florida because 7 out of the top 10 turnout counties were red counties, and they were 68% or higher turnout. Broward County and Miami-Dade County had 57% turnout.
Yeah.
If those two counties had turned out at 65 to 68, he's governor.
Absolutely.
And so when I hear somebody say, yeah, man, but I really don't care, I'm going, look, you can be 28, but trust me, as 65-year-old person, they go into the polls. My parents, 72, they work the polls.
That's right.
Well, but I think it's important for us to note that in the midterm elections, young people voting went up.
Yes.
So a lot. So it increased.
Because after 16,
Right.
because again, what happened, there were a lot of education after 16 when people said, you set out in 16,
Right.
you now saw the result. Folks like, we ain't gonna make that mistake again. But again, but these are the political dynamics that candidates make when they say, if I'm going finite time, I'm going here or here. This is where I'm going. Go ahead, Linda.
But it ain't just the candidates; it's us too. And you brought up Miami-Dade. Me and Tamika, my son, and a couple of other folks. We went to like the projects in Miami during the Amendment 4. It was even. She's right. It was actually a step lower than the projects. Like it literally, I felt like I was in a third world country. Like it was really bad. Like the utter poverty. And when we went to knock on doors for Amendment 4, people said to us, nobody has ever knocked doors here before.
There you go.
Never a candidate, never a city council person. We don't know nothing about nobody. There was no flyers on the floor, no mail in their mailboxes from any candidates. Why? Because people have written off those communities.
Yep.
Those people don't vote. These people don't care. They're not important. And in fact, the politicals call them, this is what they call them, young people, people of color, some black communities, projects, they say low propensity voters.
Yep.
I call them high potential voters. You just got to go to their doors and have
Sustained.
a conversation with them. So what I also wanted to say about the connecting the dots here, because this is, and I'm speaking here in my own personal capacity. This doesn't reflect anyone else on the stage, and it does not represent Congressman Andre Carson until he feels like he's going to represent. But me and Philip Agnew, formerly from the Dream Defenders, he's from Florida too, we're national surrogates for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I'm just going to try to connect some dots real quick, because a lot of people want to hear platitudes. Everybody wants to hear how the candidates are against white nationalism. You want to hear them talking about racism and things like that. And of course you want to hear a candidate that says racism is bad and we got to eradicate racism. The question is, what are those people going to do to actually do the things that match the words that we all want to hear? So, for example, there's not a lot of connecting of dots, but when I have personal conversations with people are like, wow, you really, that makes a lot. Like, for example, One of the reasons why a lot of our communities are in poverty is because we don't have health care or we're underinsured. So when a candidate says, I'm going to get all of y'all health care, you're not going to have co-payments, no premiums to pay, that's something to think about when you connect it to alleviation of poverty. When someone says, I'm going to cancel all of your student debt, the people in this country with the most student debt are women of color, mostly black women. So maybe Bernie Sanders isn't out in the streets with his fist up talking about Black Lives Matter, but he's like, I'm going to cancel your student debt and I'm going to give you an opportunity to start in a place to build wealth and build a foundation that we don't have because this country literally takes it from us by strapping us with loans on education, strapping us with loans on our health care, or maybe even us getting to a point where we get diagnosed with terminally ill diseases because for so long we weren't going to the doctor because we didn't want to pay that $60 and that $70 co-payment. And when people hear things like our taxes are going to go high, we're not connecting the dots. So when we hear Elizabeth Warren and others saying universal health care and we say, oh, I don't want my taxes, I'm not with Bernie, I ain't with Warren with this taxes business, we got to be more intelligent. If you ain't paying a co-payment, and you ain't paying the premiums, and the check and the money from the health care coverage your employer is providing you ain't coming out of your check, so what if you pay a little bit extra in taxes? You're still saving money. So they're playing us. In the political pundits and moderate Democrats and Republicans are playing us on these issues against each other, when in fact these candidates are actually talking to us about how are they going to alleviate and quote unquote get the plan to get these things to move forward or to happen. So all I'm saying to all of us here is we do got to connect the dots. Who do you want when you think about the White House, right? I don't care who the candidate is. Bernie Sanders, for example, ain't the most charismatic brother out there. He an angry old man. He angry white man. He's like,
Now, Linda. A long
time. He angry. But all I'm saying is you wonder why a lot of young people running out in the streets after the angry old white man? Because the angry old white man is literally channeling the same frustrations that a lot of these young people in the streets have. So all I'm saying to us is as we hear the candidates, don't just listen for the good buzzwords. Don't listen to when the candidate says the most charismatic thing or, oh, ooh, she got him good on that one, or, ooh, Julian, ooh. That's not what I'm listening for. How are you making my life better? How are you making my community better? And how are you putting money back in my pocket? And that's the kind of things we got to listen for as we move forward in the election. It's actually what young people are doing really well right now. When you go around the country and you ask young people the issues that they care about, they say, yo, cancel my student debt because I ain't trying to start out my life with about $100,000 that I owe in the bank. You know, having preventative health care, being able to go out and get a pap smear, get a mammogram. These are issues that impact our lives every single day. The housing crisis, figuring out how do we get loans for small business owners, for minority-owned businesses. These are the things that we need to be listening for. Not just about who is going to be the best and say the best thing on racism. It's not about the words, it's about the actions that have to match the words, and that's how we're going to win this election in 2020. And the last thing that I'll say really quickly about the election is that we got to start right now. We just got to start right now, because what happens is, and this is where all the funding and philanthropy comes in for folks who are philanthropists. We've taken money from philanthropists before. They wake up 6 weeks before the election and say, oh, I got $100,000. You all ready to go knock them doors? Go run. They put us out in the streets and we're tired. We need that money now. So if you got money and you're interested in winning an election, you want to organize the electorate, start giving those organizers the money now. Don't wait till 6 weeks before the election, because it's not going to work. And the last thing that I'll say that's probably controversial at a black conference, Biden ain't it. Biden is not it. Biden people ain't it for us. The young people ain't with it. The guy forgets, he can't finish a sentence. He ain't it. And he ain't President Barack Obama in his dreams that he will ever be a President Barack Obama. So that's the last thing that I'll say for the rest of the day.
Shocking. Shocking.
And
I think that, before I go to Reverend Yearwood, I think that when you talk about, again, when we start looking at all of these issues, I would say the playbook that still works is the playbook that Ella Baker gave SNCC workers when she said, when you go to those sharecroppers, take off your college clothes, put on an overall, and listen to what they want. She said they may not have more than a third grade education. She said, but they smart as hell.
That's right.
And I think what one of the things that happens is, like, people, when I travel a lot, and folks like, man, I don't know who to vote for, and this is how I start. What do you care about?
That's right.
And then when they tell me that, I then say, all right, this is why this candidate or this race has an impact on what you care about. And they go, man, I never thought about that. I had a sister in 2016. She called a radio show. She was like 25, North Carolina. She said, I don't care about the presidential race. I'm going to focus on issues in my state. I said, really? What are those 5 issues? And I said, all 5 issues she named, all of them had a direct tie-in to who was the U.S. senator and who was the president. Right. And she said, are you serious? And I'm like, yes. I said, and your state is a battleground state. And she just really could not understand the link there. But I think we have to ask folks, yes, what do you care about? And then walk them through that. Reverend, you were, go ahead.
No, Roland, that's a great segue. Thank you for that. I think that, first, let me just be clear. I am black before I am Democrat.
That's right.
And so my concern is about black people, not the Democratic Party. And so in that concern, I am super concerned about every aspect to make people of color and black people's lives better. And that you must use policy, because either you shape policy or policy will shape you. There's no in between in that process. So let me just kind of pick up what Roland was saying here, because I think that's so important. Ella Baker, one, we should know who Ella Baker is and know everything about what Ella Baker was teaching.
Yep.
And second, I think that in that aspect, we should also know who Bob Moses was and what Bob Moses did in regards to working with Fannie Lou Hamer. I actually think one of the problems right now in our movement is that we don't have enough Fannie Lou Hamers in our movement. We don't have enough powerful people and women and people and black people in general who would just simply say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, in a way that we can understand it. But let me just kind of piggyback. I think this is actually a very important at this political conversation of where we are. I mentioned earlier that, historically we just worked on an MOU together with Alpha Alpha to come together to work with Respect My Vote. That's important. Respect My Vote. Please, if you have questions about the electoral process, please go to respectmyvote.com. But I bring that up for this reason, because one of the things that's critical in this piece is that as we're having this conversation, and we definitely need to be, as Jess said earlier, this is chess, not checkers. So we have to understand how politics works. And politics is a science. And so there is a way, if we want a certain person to be elected president, we need to make sure and go into certain battleground states. There's certain places that will have an impact higher than other places. So definitely like Ohio and Indiana and Michigan, and there's a whole litany, North Carolina, Virginia, Florida. There is a political way of addressing that. So there is a place where people who live in those places, they're like almost like you're doubly important. But that doesn't mean that other people who live in Maryland or Alabama or in South Carolina or Mississippi aren't important either. I think that we have followed a blueprint where let's go to make other people powerful where our people in other states haven't been. And so we've left them behind. Georgia wasn't in play 10 years ago. It's in play now, thank God, but it wasn't in play because it was considered a red state. But if our people are hurting in Atlanta, if they're hurting in Jackson, Mississippi, we need to go there and mobilize. And if we are connected in a way, if we're mobilizing in Chicago, and we're mobilizing in Toledo, and we're mobilizing across this country, wherever our people are, that will create an atmosphere for our communities to generate excitement around this political electoral process. But if we're following somebody else's playbook, and I'm saying for too long, I get it. Listen, there is a prison industrial complex, and there's a military industrial complex. But we are also, for our age group, those of us who are operating in the 21st century, there's also a nonprofit industrial complex, in which that system is as dangerous because it tells our people where to go, how to act, what's important, who's the spokespeople, who are the activists, who are the organizers, and it plays this game where it dilutes our power. What we have to do is see our power, connect those dots, what Roland is talking about, and begin to go wherever the fight may be. And the fight right now is across this country. So I want to say what Linda said is correct, that one of the things that's so important, this election, let me be very clear, this election is a critical election. Let me say that. It's critical. It is critical at a point where, like, literally life or death. And so November 3rd of 2020 means that we have to do things we haven't done before. And so, but it means that we have to not wait for CBC to come around next year to begin to start organizing. That means that we got to start organizing right now and every single day from this point through Election Day. And again, I'll give you one thing we're doing, Respect My Vote, but there are other amazing black organizations. Melanie Campbell is amazing,
right,
with the Black Women's Roundtable, and there are other organizations like that, as well as lawyers, black lawyers who are doing the election hotline. There's so many
lawyers committed for civil rights under law for Christian Clark.
Philip Randolph. There's so many black organizations who are engaged in the civic engagement process, but we need to support them, gather them, and be with them to victory a year from now.
I'm gonna go to Tamika. Shout out to Jamani Williams, public advocate in New York. Good to see you, brother. Y'all can clap. Tamika, when we talk about this idea of how do we move, I think for a lot of people, they don't even understand that it really is a question of not how do you move a state, how do you move a city, how do you move a neighborhood. No, it's really precinct by precinct. And folks also don't realize voting rolls are public. I mean, you can literally go and see who didn't vote, who did vote. You can literally go look at the precinct number. The other day, the election in North Carolina 9, there was all this talk. You had some white conservative who put out that one county flipped from blue to red, and 35% black, and those black folks, they voted for the Republican candidate, and it's going to bode well for Trump. Well, first of all, it's a gerrymandered district. Most of the black precincts are not even in North Carolina 9, so he was lying. But that wasn't a shock. But that was the first thing that I thought of. I said, I want to see the precinct numbers. Not just the precinct numbers, I wanted to see the precinct numbers in 2019 and how do they compare to 2018 and 16, because voting really comes down to 100 here, 50 here, 200 here. Right. And so for the people who say, I don't have the time to try to go out and mobilize, my whole city, no. Just focus on your precinct. Right. The people who literally live right next door to you.
Right. And this year is going to be the census count. 2020 will be also the census count. I'm sorry, I have a cold, so my voice is not projecting. But it is also going to be the census count. And so it's going to be even more important to start in those very, very, very hyper-local communities. And just to piggyback off of what Linda was talking about in terms of when we went into a particular community in Florida during the last election, when we took the voting rolls, as you mentioned, Roland, we took it and we specifically looked for people who had voted in the past, but they did not vote in the last presidential election. What I find in certain rooms, because, we go in these rooms where everybody is working on a voter registration plan, a GOTV plan, and many of these organizations are actually focusing on people who vote all the time.
Right.
That's where they're starting. What really literally makes me terrified is that somehow we think we're going to use the same old traditional tactics in this election to be able to move folks. It is not going to happen. We actually have to focus on communities where people, again, maybe they haven't voted at all and they need to be registered, but people who have the most potential, as you said, Linda, to get them to the polls. They're already going to be touched by the groups that go and do the same thing every year. It is our responsibility, those of us who are sitting in this room who come from particular communities, to do that real grassroots work. In addition to that, I think it's important for us to note that when we send volunteers, we send these nice cleaned up looking young people who need their volunteer hours and their service hours, and they're really excited and they've got their t-shirt on and the whole thing. We send them into communities with people that do not know them, and they will not open the door. So it's our responsibility, people who come from particular communities, to go out and ensure that we are doing the door knocking, and that we are also empowering Ray Ray and Keisha and those who live in their own communities to be the frontline face of these particular campaigns. We don't do that enough. We implant ourselves into communities that we don't come from. We don't know the language. We don't know the concerns. You want to be able to send someone into a community to get them registered or to get them, to the polls, that is able to say, hey, the shootings that we've been having on the corner of 13th and whatever street, well, this particular candidate has a platform that addresses that.
Right.
I know Miss Lucy's water has been a problem, and let me tell you what we can do to address that. That is what makes people feel comfortable. And I'm not sure, because I know I've heard Jeff Johnson talking about this same type of strategy, when we're going to get it.
Well, it's like when Reverend Jackson went to Ferguson, and there was some young brothers on the corner, and he said, would y'all like to see the cop who killed Mike Brown indicted? Yeah. Do you want to see him convicted? Yeah. He said, are you registered? No. He said, well, you will never be able to serve on that jury to convict him. And they literally had no idea that, oh, wait a minute, I got to register to vote and to be on a jury? Right, it's connecting the dots. Jeff, go ahead. First of all, we're going to do questions. I'm going to come down. Hold on a second. I'm going to come down over here. I got the mic, so go ahead and turn it on. Jeff, answer. Then we're going to take questions before we bounce.
But part of what you're talking about is an issue of money and racist democratic infrastructure. So if we're going to be honest, I've worked on a number of cycles, and what happens during GOTV time, whether it's on the super PAC side or on the campaign side, you got hundreds of millions of dollars, and the people that get hired are really smart young white kids who hire their friends. And then they get sent into states they don't even know. And so what Tamika is talking about is right, but we have to talk about why. And why is because our talent is not valued. Our institutions are not valued. And so our institutions become hired guns for them. And so we're not raising super PAC level money the way that they are, and we're not building the same kind of infrastructure. So when it comes down to GOTV, our organizations end up begging people to give us money to serve our own folk versus us telling them to go to hell. And understanding that, listen, if you want to make money doing this work the way they make money doing this work, then there's only two options. Take their money and do what they say, or build a different funding ecosystem. Because what I'm saying is, you got folks right now that keep talking about the same 100 donors that are giving money to democratic institutions. I don't want none of their money, because their money is doing exactly what Tamika and Rev are talking about. I was at the NAACP in one cycle when one donor gave $120 million. Let me say this again. One donor gave one organization $120 million. Right. Do you think that the NAACP Board of Directors was controlling that voter outreach? No. Because the donor and his people that were giving the money were telling them what states to go to, where they could have unrestricted dollars, and where they had dollars that they had to spend in a certain way. So sure, you can have $5 million in to go to Mississippi, but you're going to have $40 million to go into Cleveland, because Ohio is a state that we have to win. And so they are telling us what to do. But I know, and it's not just celebrities, because we got to stop acting like celebrities got all our money. There's some quiet black money in America. There's some quiet black money of men and women who have worked in manufacturing, who have been custodial folks, that have had small businesses, that have saved money, that invested the right way, and we don't ask them because they shit ain't sexy. And the problem is, because it's not sexy, we don't pull them in. And because we don't pull them in, they like to hell with y'all. And so there's a whole ecosystem of money in this country that our organizations have to start cultivating towards strategies that are directly connected to our political power.
Yep.
And if we don't do that, then we just had these same old conversations over and over again. And that's why half of us don't want to do them no more. Because we had the same conversation about the same stuff, we complain about the same stuff, and then we take the money.
Which still goes back to the point that Linda said earlier and Tamika said, and how we also value our dollars. I remember just a good example that ties to politics. When after the first weekend of Black Panther, I put something on Instagram and I said I would really appreciate if every black person who went to see Black Panther gave $20 to HBCU. And somebody said, "What the hell is that gonna do? That ain't gonna do nothing." I said, "How do you think Black Panther made $248 million? Yo 20, yo 20, yo 20, yo 20, yo 20. They thought it was all because people bought out theaters. I'm like, no. I said, collective actually adds up.
But
I only,
even with what Linda said, there were people who were trying to Google who Robert Smith was after Morehouse's graduation.
Right.
And they're like, who the hell is this dude?
Right.
And so that was one person who literally, if we start talking about an economic impact of the gift that happened in Morehouse during this last June, you're talking about young men that are going to do something different than they had planned to at graduation because they don't have any debt.
And what has happened is, because first of all, shout out to Robert, Alpha Man. What has happened is, what people miss is, when he did that, when he said to the Morehouse alumni, he said, "This is my class." He said, "Now I'm challenging y'all." And what has happened is that those black folks with money, they now have stepped up and have said, "Okay, I'm gonna pay it off for 10 students or whatever." So it has caused other Morehouse graduates to also do exactly what he did, because he sort of spurred them to do so. We're gonna take questions. I got the mic, so here's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna hit that side, middle side, that side. We ain't lining up. And so I'm gonna start on this side, come to the center, that side. Question, no sermons. One, I got the mic. I don't need you to hold it, okay? All right, sister, you step out. I got it. Don't even worry about it. Questions, no sermonettes. Right here, right here. I'm coming back to you. Come, her hand was first. She was real quick. Okay, so what's your question?
So real quick, it's just more directed to Reverend Yearwood. It's about...
Damn, you got notes. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's my capstone. So religion and hip-hop has been increasing, but shifting in a way. So has the awareness of mental health. So how can we increase the awareness of mental health in all its forms, including like Kanye's outburst, and support black counselors, therapists, and et cetera, and these artists when they have like have backsides or like these messed up, trippy events? Like, how do we incorporate all three of these elements because of like the Kojic faith in the black community, because mental health is looked down upon, and because we make fun of black males and black females who come out and be like, I got depression, I'm suicidal, etc.
Hold up. Before Reverend Yearwood, Ro, you're a PK and you're an artist. Can you speak to that? And then Reverend Yearwood?
Personally, I spoke to a young lady earlier, but personally, I post positive affirmations on my social platforms just to encourage people. As an artist, we do go through these depressions and mental illnesses and whatnot, and I feel like it's just up to us and myself and artists to encourage people to step out and not be ashamed of those issues so we can get help.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very serious. I've actually been very encouraged by a lot of the black churches and denominations who have been, I think, trying to bring mental health into the process, and hip hop. And there's some amazing hip hop artists. One I know, D1 is just, and many others who have been doing their work and crossing over using Christianity and hip hop. I think that's growing. I think that it's interesting. The one thing, how do we connect the dots? Particularly, I think that with Common, his book, you should definitely get his book, and with him coming out being so transparent about mental health has been very powerful. Roland, one thing I definitely want to hit all of those, come back to you on a personal point. One of the things, Roland, I think Jeff mentioned something that's very important to me. Institutionally, the Hip Hop Caucus, as I mentioned before, is an organization now that has a number of women who are in leadership and the young people. In one of your, as you go around, the Hip Hop Caucus DC has a quick half-minute poem they want to just make sure and put out about what's going on here in DC. So please, can you put your hand up here? If you can hit the brother right here, he can give his poem. That'd be very important. Thank you.
All right, you done answering her question here. I'm gonna go right here.
Thank you.
Got a question?
Hey, how you guys doing? Basically, my question is, why do we not talk like Republicans when it comes to, fear mongering? They fear monger pretty hard. They say some really hardcore things in order to get the people out to vote, because fear is a powerful thing. One of the scariest things I know I've ever felt, right, and I'm sure a whole bunch of black people in this room have felt the same, is getting pulled over by the police. Because at any given point in that conversation, they could fear for their life. Whatever the heck they fear, they could use deadly force on me, and now it's all over. Just because a regular random day, it don't matter how many people in public, it don't matter what location, what time, it doesn't matter. That moment is the scariest moment of my life.
So what you're saying is use fear as a drive folks to the polls. Who wants to answer that? Anybody? Anybody?
I'll just.
Y'all fearful to answer the fear question?
I will just say this. I mean, when I say fascism and not fascism, I do hope that it instills some fear in people. But what I also want, I don't want to be like the Republicans. I want to be visionary. I want to be able to give people the opportunity to imagine what kind of country do we want to live in? Like what do you want for your children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren? And I think that's the thing that we're never able, because everybody uses fear on us. If you don't do this, you're not going to get this. If you don't do that, your life is. So we got to try to be different and give some alternative. But once 2020 comes around and we're in the general election, you better believe I'm going to be like, y'all going to die if you don't vote the right way. But right now, I'm visionary.
You're right. Question.
First and foremost, I want to give honor to all those who are 70 and over and those who are under 20. Take care of your bodies so you can live to be 70 and older. My question, if I had a question, is...
Do you have a question? If I had a question. Damn it, ask the question.
It's amazing. Well, my question is, how do we apply the blueprints of the women institutional builders, Charlotte Huckin Brown, Mary McLeod Bethune, Nannie Helen Burroughs, and Lucy Craft Langley, into present context and for the next 300 years? What did their blueprint do for us today explicitly?
Tamika.
Actually, a black man should answer that question. No, that's where we got to get. But, I think you're 100% right that we have to be able to look at some of our people who have gone on and look at the institutions that they built. And one of them, when I hear you talk about Bethune, just thinking about the institution, not just of college, but also the institution of community teaching and community education is so important. One of the things about me, when people say, how did you get to where you are today in terms of my commitment in this movement, my parents did not just tell me about the work or talk about it around me. They took me, they read with me, they gave me the skill sets directly from their mouths and from the movement to help me to develop my own understanding about where I wanted to be in this work. We often don't take the time to educate our children when they are out of school about their history and some of these institutions that have been built and what they mean to our communities. And I would say that it's something that we really have to work on, is figuring out how we educate our children outside of the education system, because we know that they're not getting what they need there. And there's enough literature out there to be able to pull from. And, quite frankly, some of us may need to learn with our children. I know I grew up with my son, and I had to educate him and me at the same time. That he doesn't always use it. I kill Jeff Johnson about my child when his ears, he can't even get away from me because I'm like, and I don't know what to say and what to do. And, he's like, hey, he's got to come into his own, but don't be confused. He heard you. He hears you. And so even when they are fighting against it, having statements up around the house, that was something that my parents made us do. We had to put different statements of affirmation up. Different history lessons had to be included in every conversation in our household. And we have to figure out how to do that, because I know that not enough of us feel we have the time or even the knowledge, to be able to share that with our kids. But it's okay to say that both of us need to learn at the same time.
Brother, back. I was looking for
real quick, Roland. Real quick, just because I hope I'm hearing you in your question, brother. I think the lesson learned, I think even as I've challenged my own leadership and development, is that the women that you talked about understood that personal mastery was about the development of communal infrastructure, not personal mastery for the sake of individual advancement. And so they got that. They were brilliant, and they had individual acclaim, but it was for the purpose of communal infrastructure that raised even as they raised themselves. And the male infrastructure has been about how do I raise myself, often at the cost of communal infrastructure. And so that's the lesson that I hear you asking about, at least that I'm learning, and that as we build, that's the model that we have to replicate.
I was looking for and earlier I said Steve Perry. He had actually stepped out, and I know some folks how they feel about charter schools, whatever. We're talking about impact. Steve said something that Diddy, when Diddy came to him and said, "I want to help you start a charter school in Harlem." Steve was like, "Look, man, this is real. Just do a scholarship." He said, "I don't want to do a scholarship. I want to help actually start a school." And there are people out here who, again, whatever you're feeling about charter schools, don't matter. I'm down with them. I support every form of education as long as we get educated. But the fact of the matter is, they started schools. And there are black people who are actually starting charters who are teaching black people, who are teaching black children. We're going to have our school choices, the Black Choice panel from room 145A from 4:30 to 6. And again, that's important because we can talk about public education and we can wait. We can sit here and make demands, but there are black people who have opened public charter schools who are teaching black kids and actually employing black teachers at a higher rate than some other places. And so we should also salute them and not just hate on them. Got to give a shout out. I saw you walk in here, Tiffany Lofton, head of the NAACP Youth and College Division. But y'all come on, stand up. I saw your blonde hair. I saw you. Question.
How y'all doing today?
Just go to the question.
All right, well, I'm Quante Wright. I'm currently running for Congress for the 24th District of New York. And I was once incarcerated. And one thing I find, it's hard to mobilize our people and get our people out to vote. So I just want to ask anybody generally on the panel, how can we use hip-hop to mobilize the black vote, to get the black people out to vote?
Where you been for the last hour? I'm messing with you. Y'all go ahead. Answer the question.
I think we just gotta, not only just the artists, but people that the artists look up to, the influential people in the hood. I see my brother Tony Lewis Jr. back there. I don't know exactly where you at, but if you in D.C., he's somebody in his area, you need to speak to him because he's in touch with the people, like the people that's on the streets with the kids as well as in these rooms here too. You gotta get in touch with them even more so than the rappers. I mean, the kids is gonna follow the rappers, but the rappers often look up to the dudes in the hood that is doing other things. And not that Tony ain't into no other things, but he's a person that the people into the other things look up to, and they will listen to him in his hood. I can't speak for everywhere, but he's a brother you definitely could speak to. And if you're in D.C., him, like my brother Corey Knight, he's here. It's different people that's on the ground level here, and they could tell you who you need to be with.
Taking 5 more questions. We're over time. Hold on. We're over time now. Here, then here. And so what's your question? Put your hands down. I'm messing.
All right. I'm Masha Khat. I lead global diversity at Eventbrite. And just to give you a little context, I used to do corporate philanthropy at Google. And something that Jeff Johnson earlier said really resonated with me. You talked about the lack of strategic thought process around coalition building from different industries, including hip hop, technology, financial services, et cetera. And what I'm wondering is for the people that, like myself and others I know, like venture capitalists, Black folks who have cash, where do we go to find that group of individuals who are actually trying to have that conversation? Because I think there are many more of people who have a little bit of means, especially by the look of this room, like people come dressed, you got something. And so my question is, where do we put it? And have you all heard of organizations that are starting to build that kind of collective power and coalition building?
Who wants that?
So one is the Collective PAC. They're prepared immediately. And we just had an advisory council meeting for the Collective PAC this morning. So I'd love to talk to you about that. We just talked about the fact that this new ecosystem of donors is possible, but we have to be really clear about what the agenda is, so we know that there's a level of integrity. But I think whether you talk to Linda or Tamika, Collective PAC, if you talk to Phil Agnew, if you talk to Rev, I mean, I think that there are a lot of people in this room that have organizations and were prepared. I think we need to convene to have a conversation about impact and about clarity around the strategy towards that impact, so that we're not funding antiquated methodology, but we're merging effective tradition with progressive methodology with a new source of funding to ensure and be very clear about what those outcomes are, both politically and otherwise.
Yep.
Because those investments you're talking about shouldn't just be about 2020.
Yep.
Because I don't want to build a machine that stops
There you go.
in November of 2020 versus how are we creating a trajectory for greater institutional impact as we move forward. So we can definitely have that conversation.
And on that point there, one of the things that Jesse Jr. said, he said one of the biggest mistakes that his dad did after '88 was not keeping that infrastructure in place that could then be used for other candidates, other campaigns, and then building from there, which is one of the smartest things that Bernie Sanders did after his run in 2016, creating this additional organization. And I dare say, and look, we know people, it's like Jesus and Obama is 1A, but one of the mistakes of Obama for America, it became Organizing for America, and it was only about him, and it wasn't about a broader infrastructure. And that's one of the mistakes I think we also make.
And I just want to also make sure I shout out Higher Heights for Better America, Higher Heights for America, excuse me, y'all. Higher Heights for America.
Yep.
It is an organization that focuses specifically on funding Black women campaigns. So you should check them out as well. I'm actually on the board.
You got homework. Question?
Hi, I'm an artist and educator and activist. So I came up through I'm Black and I'm Proud. Stevie Wonder's song for birthday was the song that perpetuated Martin Luther King's birthday to become a holiday. I need to know from you all, who are the positive, progressive rap artists, singers that I need to know that I can utilize to mobilize myself as an educator and an activist in the community so we can use that music to move ourselves forward?
Ro James.
My son.
Sitting right there. Ro James, my son. Absolutely. Sister in the blue over here. Actually, maybe she's been up that long. Come on, stand up. I see you right there. Okay. Girl, I was coming back. Come on.
So I guess my question is for Mallory and for Linda. I heard you guys touch on it a little bit about mobilizing the young people that usually don't show up, and I think it's really critical for people to understand the difference between respectability politics and also dealing with young people who don't understand what that looks like. I'm an activist, a BLM activist. I ran for state representative in the city of Boston. But I also mobilized 45,000 people against racism in 2017. And realizing the correlation with young people is that they need something relatable. So I was able to get more young people to come out and vote by explaining to them that the hospitals make $180,000 every time they're shot, or $60,000 every time they're incarcerated, versus trying to explain to them whatever Biden and whoever else was talking about, mainly because they were able to understand the correlation between incarceration and somebody else making money off their back. So can you speak to that?
Before you do that, you said you mobilized 45,000 against racism. Did you also do data collection while you were doing it?
Yes. So we created a database to keep in touch with those people. I've actually done 5 different mobilizations in the city of Boston. I did fight supremacy when we in 2017. I just recently did a counter protest against straight pride, whatever the hell that is, and then. We continue to mobilize individuals around race, around economic disadvantage, while also working with our district attorney, who's the first black woman in the state of Massachusetts. So what I did is something that people don't normally do. I had her come talk to shooters in my community, because those are the young people who we need to be having a discussion with. And when you sit down and have those conversations with them, you realize that the same things that they're experiencing is the same things that victims are experiencing. It's just that nobody's talking to them. Right. And so by us doing that, we were able to provide direct service. And I think that a lot of people shy away from that, especially with the nonprofit comment. We do this trickle-down effect, right? And people don't like to give to individuals as activists, like you said, right? Poverty is disrespectful. So with that being said, being able to get people to understand that during this election, during 2020, how important it is to talk to that young man who you walk past every day, who you ignore. Because they want to be a part of, but they've been failed on multiple different platforms.
And the point I asked about database, and you're going to answer a question, which, Tamika, you know, we talked about it so long. There are a lot of us, people organize rallies, they organize marches, they organize sit-ins, you name it. But what they don't do is they don't collect data. Right. That is names, emails, cell phones. That was one of the smartest things. If you want to talk about the work that Linda and Tamika and Carmen and the women who were the co-chairs of the Women's March, the data collection that they did was critically important, because we've had too many marches, and then when you say on Monday, where's the list, they like, oh, but we had a big march, which means nothing if you have no data to then follow up. Go right ahead. And then I'm going to take 2 more questions.
I'm going to let Linda answer this, but I just wanted to really just give you some honor and praise for running for office, and just to say to people, do not let folks tell y'all that protest movements don't also produce people, elected officials, and people who run for office
That's
and
right.
do well in the community. It is happening all over the country. When you look at the squad and many other folks who are in, not just in Congress, but in state houses across this country, those are folks that came out of protest movements, and they knew that they could make a difference in their community. So y'all take that and make sure you run with it.
And you don't need and no disrespect to any CBC members, but you also don't need the permission of the Black Caucus to run.
Yes. Right.
Ayanna Presley.
That's right.
Ayanna Presley is a member of Congress because she ran against an incumbent white Democrat. CBC members supported him. That's fine. She beat him. But there are a lot of us who go, man, if I can get the CBC support, no. Run your race, and then whoever gets the most votes wins. Question.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samir. I'm an activist from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Southeast Europe. Back there in Europe, we have a huge problem with white supremacists and racists from America coming to Europe and aligning, uniting with European white supremacists, racists, Islamophobes, anti-Semites, etc. Fighting racism and all discrimination is today not just American problem, European problem, it's a transnational and international problem. My question to you, how do you see transnational, international alliances between American activists fighting racism and European activists fighting racism, and also activists in China, Japan, Hong Kong, all around the world?
Linda?
Do the foreign-looking one on the panel. I'm going to get to your question in a second, because that's a very important question, but I wanted to go back to the sister for a second. Many of you may not know, but there's a young, brilliant, bold sister in St. Louis named Cori Bush who's running for Congress. She's a young woman who's come out of the Ferguson protest movement. She's absolutely the most amazing young lady that I've ever met, who's actually from the community, knows the community, has the support and backing of the community, but she needs all of you to win. And so if you look her up, C-O-R-I, Bush, young black woman, amazing. And one last thing to the question is, young people don't do respectability politics. We just don't do it. We know it. We know the BS when we hear. We also don't like the status quo. We don't like people telling us, here's a box. That's the box we're comfortable in. Don't try to take us out the box because the box is good. We want to be outside the box. We're tired of the boxes that we are being put in. So with young people, they want to hear the vision, they want to hear the solutions, and they don't want you to say, well, that's just the guy we've been knowing for 25 years. You know, he good. He goes to the church with us, and he came to the church, and he comes to the mosque. Like, the kids don't care about that. So we got to really be able to speak the language of the young people. And also, on the protest movement in particular, one of the things we've talked about this, I've spoken about this on faith panels, is sometimes the kids ain't in the church. And the church for them is the street because that's where their friends are being killed, and that's where the struggle is, that's where the pain is. So that's where they're using their faith to protest in the street. So we also say, oh, those kids don't know God, and, you know, they got to go find God. God is in the streets with them. And so that's the kind of also relationship we want to have with the young people in that way. And to what this brother's saying, that's very important because we have a lot of American exceptionalism. We think everything's all about us. It's all about America. We trying to be good. We don't care about nobody else. But really, we are interconnected all over the world. What's happening in Brazil with Bolsonaro, what's happening in Europe with the rise of white nationalism, with Boris Johnson, with all these folks, that actually impacts us. It's going to impact things like climate justice across the world. It impacts things like wars and going into unjust wars. So we really got to be paying attention. And I apologize, brother, on behalf of the American people about the anti-Semites and Islamophobes and racists we're sending to you from here, like people like Steve Bannon and Gorkas and all these folks going around the world. And guess what's happening? They're winning because they're winning elections across the world. So we can't just say anymore these white supremacists are marginal.
Right.
They're not really Main Street. They're Main Street. But what I know is that they are not more than us. The question is, why are their voices louder than us, and why are they able to build more political power than we are? You know why? Because they're focused, because they're determined, because they're consistent, because they're persistent, because they wake up every morning to be anti-black, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBT. They put their money on the message. The
Right.
ads that were being run yesterday on ABC during that debate, during the Democratic debate, ABC was running ads for the Republicans. Where are our ads, right, for the issues that we care about? Where are our ads on ending gun violence, the opioid crisis, on all education, all the issues? We got to start putting our money where our mouths are. We got to start believing that when we say things even like Black Lives Matter, Black people in Africa matter, Black people in Brazil matter, Black people in Central America, Haitians matter, the Bahamians are Black people and they matter too. So we got to start looking at these issues also in a transnational way and seeing our struggles as Americans connected to the struggles of people in China or people in Palestine or people in North Africa and people all over the world.
I'm adding a final thing to his point, which we have to realize. What you're seeing happen in Europe, what you're seeing happen in Italy, in those specific countries, is the exact same thing here. That is white fear. The demographics are changing. White folks in France, in England, in Italy, they're not having children. And that's why they're fighting all the immigration. Why do you think it's happening here? Again, in the next 5 years, in at least 10 states, the annual white death rate will be higher than the white birth rate. And so all of this backlash, so if you think it's about 2020, it's not. Everything that we're seeing is about 2043. The fear when America becoming a nation majority of people of color, and they're scared to death in France, in Germany, in Italy, of folks who are coming from African nations to those countries because they're saying, oh, we're going to be a minority. So that's what this whole backlash is. It's about power and resources because white folks have never been able to share. And so that's what the fight is. And so I'm just saying, if you think it's about 2020, you're wrong. You better be prepared. This is about to be, look, real quick, there's a reason Mitch McConnell said we will fill every federal judicial vacancy before the election November 2020. They are trying to cement the federal judiciary for the next 50 years. So when minorities are demographically the majority, they will still be in control of the court system. You better understand what's going on. This is not happenstance. It's by design. Final question here. Question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shalitha McInnes. I'm from the city of Detroit, and I am running for the President of the United States. And I want to know, how can I get the support to help me get my name out there, get some advertisement? And it's been really difficult because everyone wants to say, well, you're not at the debate, but they don't know that you have to qualify for the debate. You have to have at least 360,000 contributors in 20 different states. So a lot of people don't want to support, or they're skeptical about supporting, but I'm here and I want to win because I want to make a difference in everyone's life right now, because there's so many things that's going on in our country that I feel I'm the one that will be able to to make a difference.
First time you run for office?
I have been a precinct delegate in my area for 4 terms.
Got it. A precinct delegate, I'm talking about the political office.
No, not political office.
Okay. All right.
It's been on my heart for the last 2.5 years, and I want to make a difference for our citizens here in the country. So I'm out there and ready, just need your support.
Anybody? And then then there's going to be a final comment before we wrap up, because we're actually 17 minutes over time.
Do the damn thing, and talk to as many people as you can, and spread your message as many places as you can. The system obviously doesn't support candidates that aren't part of party infrastructure, and I don't think that means it's right. I don't know you well enough to know where you're coming from, but I love the boldness of you standing up in a room of black people and saying you running for president of the United States. And so go twice and tell them.
All right, we're gonna do final comments real quick, because again, we're 17 minutes over time. I got this. All right, real quick, final comments.
Thank you, God. Thank you for having me. I'm inspired by everybody on the panel. This is my first time meeting you guys. This is my first time here. I've learned a lot today. Thank you very much, and that's what I have to say.
Reverend Yearwood, final comment.
Next week is a climate strike. Please, if you want to be involved, be involved. Climate change is our issue as well. We have to make sure and stand up. Climate strike next Friday. Please be involved. Thank you.
Dave.
Final comment, 60% of the electorate in 2020 are between the ages of 18 and 55 years old. The vast majority of people in that demographic grew up listening to hip-hop music and being exposed to hip-hop culture. And, I'll say again, I think hip-hop has a lot of the solutions we need if we can figure out how to get to it. But if we could unite folks of all backgrounds who love hip-hop, we could really, make a stand and get some things changed that we want.
Jay?
25% of my books sales that's made today will be going to Tamika for the cause in the Bahamas. They're outside. My autobiography. Thank you.
Linda?
I said a lot. I just want to say thank you to Congressman Carson for always giving us this opportunity and this platform, and I look forward to seeing all of you at the polls twice in 2020.
Tamika?
Lord, anyway. One, I want to say that Linda Sarsour is not a young person, so she needs to stop saying that. Nor is Jeff Johnson.
We look young, so we trying to milk it, right?
I'm not buying it. I'm not young.
Damn that. I'm younger than my daddy. I'm young. So y'all
No, you guys, they are. You have the spirit of young people, and they really listen to and respect what we say, and so that is something to have great gratitude for. But I just want to say to this young man here who asked the question about Europe and all these other places where we know that there is, a sense of racism that is spreading, that when black people are free, everyone will be free. That's right. And so a lot of other folks ask us to join their fight. The question is, when will people from other countries and other places join our fight? Because it all starts with us. And as long as black folks are lifted, Reverend Jesse Jackson said something to me that I will never forget. I used to talk about black people being at the bottom. I would say all the time on panels, we're at the bottom. If you lift the bottom, then the rest of, the whole thing. And one day he said, what else can you think of when you talk about people being at the bottom? And I used the word foundation. And he said, that's exactly right, that black folks are actually at the foundation of the entire world. right? The mother of civilization. So when you lift the foundation, the rest of the world will actually be free.
Jeff.
So I don't know if you're going to recognize her because I know we're over time, but the sister who is standing is Sister Claudette. And when I was hold on. When I was 19, I invited Minister Farrakhan to the University of Toledo to speak, and it was the first time I received death threats. And I had never received support the way I received support from the nation, because other elders were hating on me as a 19-year-old leader. And they didn't know me at all, but they stood by me and sent members of the Fruit to my apartment to where I had gotten the death threats to make sure I was safe. There are young people who are already superstars that you just think are kids. And I just wish you'd
thing. So, like when I'm with Tamika and the movement and marching, of course, it's resistance, especially with things with the with LBGT and just different things that with the hip hop community and me coming from prison, it's just different pressures and peer pressures that we face, especially being a man. So, Mika stresses to me, if it don't apply, let it fly, never speak on it. But my thing is, I'm